Hi everyone, hope you're all doing great. Now in this video, we are going to discuss about fetopelvic relationships. Okay, so how a fetus is going to position itself in the uterus and what are the various terminologies that are used to define the position of the baby during delivery and all. Okay, now we'll start with the discussion. Fetopelvic relationships. Okay, we'll see what is lie. Lie is defined as the relationship between the longitudinal axis of the uterus and the longitudinal axis of the fetus. Okay. For example, if you take this is the maternal abdomen, okay, and this is the uterus, okay. Now, if a fetus lying in the abdomen, it can lie like this or it can lie like this, okay, or it can lie like this, okay. Now, basically what we call this type of relationship when the longitudinal axis of the baby and the longitudinal axis of the mother are parallel to each other, okay. So, this is defined as a longitudinal lie, okay, and where the longitudinal axis of the fetus is transverse to the longitudinal axis of the mother. So, this is how the longitudinal axis of the mother is passing. But if you see here, the longitudinal axis of the fetus is lying just at right angles to the longitudinal axis of the mother. So, this relationship is known as transverse lie of the fetus. Okay. Now, in this one, we are able to see that the baby is not lying in a longitudinal lie, neither in a transverse lie also. Then, this lie is known as, that is somewhat oblique, right? So, this lie is known as oblique lie. Understand? Now, in this third picture, you are able to see that it is neither in a longitudinal lie nor in a transverse lie. But this is in a crossed manner, okay. So, this lie is known as oblique lie. Understood? So, these are the various types of lie we see, okay. So, this is a picture for better understanding, okay. So, this is a longitudinal lie, okay. This is also a longitudinal lie, but remember, while seeing the pic of the baby, you are able to see the head of the baby is downwards, whereas here the head of the baby is upwards. So, whether it is a cephalic presentation or a breech presentation, the lie is longitudinal lie, okay. And this is a transverse lie where the baby is lying horizontally, okay. Also, you have one more type of lie that is known as unstable lie, okay. Unstable lie means the lie of the baby is not fixed, okay. We cannot tell whether it is in a longitudinal lie or a transverse lie or a oblique lie. It is not fixed at all. One time we examine it will be in a transverse lie, other time we examine it will be in a longitudinal lie, like that, okay. Mostly lie of the fetus has to get fixed by at least by 37 weeks, okay. But in some cases there can be unstable lie either due to unknown causes, that is idiopathic, and this happens to be the most common cause, okay. But in some cases what happens is, this lie can happen due to various pathological reasons also. Number one, is if there is any pelvic abnormality. Okay. Number 2, if there is any abnormality with the liquor. Okay. For example, if there is polyhydramnios, when there is more liquor, there is more space created for the baby, so it keeps on changing its lie. And number 3, it can happen even with abnormalities in the placenta, like placenta previa. Okay. What is happening in placenta previa is, suppose this is the uterus, the placenta is occupied in the lowermost part of the uterus. Okay. So obviously most of the part in the lowest part of the uterus is taken by the placenta, and so it can happen for the baby to have unstable lie. Okay. Next thing what we are going to see is presentation. So what is presentation? Presentation is the part of the baby or fetus which enters the pelvic inlet first, or in simple words you can keep it as the part of the baby which is occupying the lowermost portion of the uterus. Understood? Okay. So what can be the possible presentations? Okay. So normally like this only we'll have the baby, right? Normally these presentations can be a cephalic presentation or a podalic presentation or a shoulder presentation. So cephalic presentation means the head becomes the presenting part. Podalic presentation, the breech or the buttocks becomes the presenting part, and the shoulder presentation. Okay. So here tell me the lie. Cephalic presentation is a longitudinal lie, right? Podalic presentation is also occurs in a longitudinal lie, whereas shoulder presentation occurs in a transverse lie. Okay. Next we will see the presenting part. Remember, presentation is different and presenting part is different. Okay. Presentation is merely the part of the baby which is entering through the pelvic inlet first. What is presenting part means? The part of the presentation, okay, that lies closer to the internal cervical os, or in other words you can tell it as the part that is palpable while doing a per-vaginal examination. Okay, suppose I'll explain you this. Suppose if we take a cephalic presentation, okay, if I draw a head of the baby, it is just like this, right? So this whole part is called as head. Okay. So, but we have learnt in fetal skull that there are different terminologies applied to this cranial vault also, right? Now, from anterior fontanelle to posterior fontanelle, this is going to be the vertex. This region is going to be the sinciput, and posteriorly this region is going to be the occiput. So we cannot define everything as cephalic. Okay. To make it more specific, how we are going to define this cephalic presentation means it can be a vertex presentation or a brow presentation or a face presentation. Understood? Okay. And the other presentations, presenting parts can be the breech or the shoulder. as we seen in the other type of lice. Okay. So, if we see, so here we are able to see that there is a face presentation. Okay, face is presenting here. And this is a brow presentation. Okay, the head is in a deflexed position, and while you are doing PV examination, you will be able to palpate this region. Okay, that is a brow presentation. And this is a breech presentation where the podalic side of the baby is presenting. And in a transverse lie, while doing a pervaginal examination, you will be palpate the shoulder first, right? So, it is known as a shoulder presentation. Okay. Next, we will see what is defined as attitude. Attitude is basically defined as the relationship between the fetal parts with one another. Okay. So, if there is flexion attitude, then the chin touches the chest. If there is a deflection attitude, the head is in a military posture. Means how the military men stand, they stand straight, right? So, there is no flexion or deflection. Next is extension attitude, where the occiput is touching the back. Okay. So, these are the three attitudes. Okay. First one is a flexion attitude. Next one is a deflection attitude. And next one is a extension attitude. Okay. And among this, flexion attitude is the most favorable one. Okay. Because if the fetal head is flexed, the least diameter of the fetal skull is going to present, and that will be favorable for vaginal delivery. Okay. Next we will see the denominator. So, denominator is defined as the arbitrary point on the presenting part to define the fetal position. Okay, so next we will be seeing position, but to define that position you have to know what the denominator is, and this denominator is basically chosen as the important point on the presenting part of the fetus. Okay, so what are the various presentations we have seen so far? So, in cephalic presentation, we have either the vertex or brow or the face to present. You can have a breech presentation. You can have a transverse slide in which a shoulder presentation is there. Okay. So, in vertex, the denominator is occiput. In brow presentation, it is the frontal bone or the frontum, and in face presentation, it is the mentum. And in breech presentation, we choose the sacrum as a denominator, and shoulder presentation, it is the acromion. Okay. So, this picture shows the various denominators. Okay. So, you are able to see the various denominators here. So, acromion is the denominator in case of shoulder presentation, mentum in case of face presentation, frontal eminence in case of brow presentation, and occiput in case of cephalic vertex presentation, and sacrum is the denominator in case of breech or podalic presentation. Okay. Next we will see position. See, defining position of the baby in the pelvis is very important to consider what mode of management has to be done during delivery. Okay. Now basically, if you take a maternal pelvis, it is round like this. Okay. The outlet can be taken as a 360-degree angle. Okay. Now we can divide the pelvis into various quadrants. Okay. So in this angle, anteroposterior, transverse and oblique. Okay. With this various diameters, the fetal positions can also lie. Okay. So this is basically an anterior position of the pelvis. This is this is oblique, this is transverse, this is going to be posterior, and this is going to be the oblique posterior. Yes, so this will be oblique anterior, and this is again going to be transverse. Okay. So define the position of the fetus. Okay. First point what you should know is the denominator of the presenting part. Second point you should know, which is the right and left side of the pelvis. Third one, you have to define the position of the fetus as anterior, transverse or posterior, depending upon whether the fetal part is present in the front of the pelvis or at the side of the pelvis or at the back of the pelvis, right? So now always think like you are examining a patient. Okay, so whenever you are examining a patient, the patient's right side will be towards your left and the patient's left side towards your right. Okay, now finding the anterior and posterior part of the pelvis is not that tough. Okay, where you have the pubic symphysis, that is the anterior part, and where you have the sacral promontory, that is the posterior part. Okay, we can derive 8 arbitrary positions in the pelvis. Okay, so we'll see how we are doing it. Okay, so it just comes like this. Okay, so these are the 8 positions. Okay, so whatever the denominator you are getting, you have to define it along with it. Okay, so this is the denominator anterior. Already we have to define this is the right side of the patient, this is the left side of the patient. So denominator anterior, this is left denominator anterior. Then that is lying in the transverse line, that is left denominator transverse. This is left denominator posterior. This is denominator posterior. Okay. Then this is the right denominator posterior, right denominator transverse, and right denominator anterior. Okay. So how many positions we got? We got it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 positions are possible in any kind of presentation. Okay. So this is how we have it in a cephalic presentation. Okay. So number 1 is, so see, this will be the right side of the pelvis. This will be the left side of the pelvis. Okay. Even if we didn't see this, okay, you have to see which is the side of the pelvis first. Then you have to see which is the presenting part, that is the cephalic part, and in that the denominator is the occiput. So denominator you have to write, and then you have to see whether it is in the anterior or transverse or in the posterior portion of the pelvis. So this denominator is now on the anterior side. So you have to mention it as right occiput or anterior. The same way we will have the left occipito anterior, right occipito transverse. See here the occiput is in the transverse position. Okay. Then since the occiput is lying in the left side here, it is known as left occipito transverse. Okay. Here if you see the occiput is in the facing the sacrum. Okay. And it is facing in the right side of the sacrum. So, it is a right occipito posterior. Here the occiput is in the left quadrant and it is facing posterior. So, it is a left occipito posterior. The same way you can have the other denominators also. Okay. So, among these positions, okay, the most common position is left occipito transverse. Okay. The second most common position is left occipito anterior. Okay. The most common mal position is occipito posterior. Okay. And among the lies, longitudinal lie is favorable for normal delivery, whereas transverse lie is always an indication of cesarean section. Okay. Why always when there is a transverse lie we have to do cesarean section means, it is because while there is a transverse lie, okay, there is more chance of cord prolapse. Okay, because in either a cephalic presentation or a breech presentation, the part impacts completely over the cervix. It is not going to allow the cord prolapse. But in transverse lie, it is not like that. There is more chance of cord prolapse because the lower part of the uterus is completely empty. So, and it is easy for the umbilical cord to come out easily. Okay. The most common mal presentation is breech. Okay. So, with this, we are finishing the fetopelvic relationships. Until we meet in the next video, happy learning, take care and bye-bye.